Okay. So, first of all, before we sing, I just want to remind you, in case you don't realize, right after we sing, then Asha's going to be answering questions. And so this song is called Give Me Light. And the words go, give me a light to light my way. Why don't we say that? Give me a light to light my way. Truth is the light, so wise men say. Truth is the light, so wise men say. Let's do it again. Give me a light to light my way. Truth is the light, so wise men say. Okay, now we're going to sing it, and we're going to all sing it together 3 times. We'll sing it first once so you can hear it, and then we'll sing it together 3 times, and then we're going to start moving things around, and you'll see. Okay.
Give me a light to light my way. Truth is the light, so wise men say. Give me a light to light my way. Truth is the light, so wise men say. Give me a light to light my way. Truth is the light, so wise men say.
One more time.
Give me a light to light my way. Truth is the light, so wise men say.
Well done. Okay, great. Yay. Now we're going to get a little more complicated. Okay. All right. So I'm going to direct everybody here. You don't really have a clear line of delineation.
They can decide.
We're going to divide in half. This group, wherever you want to divide yourselves, is going to be singing with this group. And that group is going to be singing with this group. This is just the first time.
What if we identify with that group?
You can move over if you want.
Now's the time to get
It's up to you, Scott.
Okay.
Musical chairs.
That's a personal choice.
Okay. So, this group's going to start, and then I'll bring this group in. Okay, so 1, 2, ready, go.
Give me a light to light my way. Truth is the light, so light my way. Truth is the light, so light my way. Truth is the light, so wise men say. Truth is the light, so light my way. Truth is the light, so wise men say.
Now, are you ready to get a little
You
more?
deserve a hand. Go ahead.
Now, do a little more. No. Come here. We're going into 4 parts now. So, from about here, you guys sing with Om Shanti's group, and she will be like animate. These 3, 4 will be animatedly. Follow them. Don't look at me. And then wherever the middle was, over to. You're going to be with these guys. All right, and then from the middle over to. Not too much. Like maybe here. Inez and Bill. Yeah. Okay. So right here, you guys can move down there a little bit. Okay. You're with this group. And then the far left-hand field with Dambar and Ram, okay? You guys are starting.
Okay, here we go.
1, 2, ready, go.
Give me a light to light my way. Truth is the light, so wise men say. So light my way. To light my way. So wise men say. So wise men say. So light my light to light my way. So wise men say. So wise men say. To light my light to light my way. So wise men say. So wise men say.
if you've sung in parts or sung in a choir. The answer is yes. You just sang 4 parts. There were 4 different parts happening, and it's a good way to kind of train your ear so that you can sing. You have to go on alone. You have to sing what you're singing despite what else is happening on the stage. Okay, thank you, choir.
Well done. Well done. Debbie's right on it, okay. Wait, we need to give you a mic, though, so that online can hear. And the recording comes out right. Just give us a second. Okay, Debbie right here, red hair. Raise your hand up, Debbie. I don't know if he knows you. Okay, there you are. Okay. Now, yes.
Okay, if I don't ask this now, I'm going to be very nervous. So, can you shed some insight on the intertwining of sexuality and spirituality on the path?
Okay, no. Everybody, pardon me? Okay, here comes the, yeah, you got it. Well, actually, you said, can I shed light? So I have the right to just say, no. But I can, so I will, or I'll try a little bit. Swamiji, I remember in a conversation we had once, he said, sex is a physical imperative. We eat, we sleep, we're cold, we put on a sweater. We just think of it just like the body requires certain things. If you don't follow them, you don't live. Sexuality is a physical imperative. It is a very imperative, but nonetheless, that's just really what we're dealing with. We're not dealing with anything more confusing than that. It's just that we live in physical bodies, and physical bodies have realities. Because we identify so deeply with our physical bodies, we are strongly impelled by the things that happen. Sexuality gets more confusing because it also has to do with our deep desire for connection, our deep desire for love, and just of all the senses, actually the sense of touch is the most compelling because of sexuality. Hunger is, you're starving, but when you read books like people in concentration camps and prisons, especially in the concentration camp, when these people were near death, sexuality was still there, which was just so astonishing that you would think that other things would just take over. But I think that's because the desire for connection is so profound. What are we really working with? And then we start associating physical touch, physical experience with a much deeper longing. And what's happening in our particular culture now is, because we're such a materialistic age, we just take everything on a materialistic level, but that's a whole different question. So the fundamental, because the way you phrase the question, sexuality and spirituality, the fundamental question is, what is it that the heart is really longing for, and what is actually going to satisfy the heart? And we keep searching for experience because we're not satisfied. And when we begin to feel all those restless longings, especially the loneliness, just wanting to be seen, wanting to be understood, wanting to have this deep connection with one person. The last book that Swami Kriyananda wrote was actually a novel. He called it Love Perfected, Life Divine. And it was a rewrite of a novel that had been written 100 years ago by this very popular woman author named Marie Corelli, who wrote about spiritual subjects. And there were a few too many pages between the front and back cover of Marie Corelli's book. And also, Marie Corelli was known at the time for taking on big spiritual subjects, which were a little bigger than her actual understanding, but nonetheless, she wrote beautifully. There's quite a few books by her. If you're a novel reader like I am, you might enjoy finding them. The subject was soulmates, that book, and it was a little bigger than she was. And Swamiji felt the subject deserved a more elevated rewrite, so he rewrote the book using a lot of her pages. And in the context of that, writing that book, Swamiji said this, and it's in the introduction to the book, I believe, which he asked me to write. He said, every human being longs to be loved, not only impersonally by God, but personally by another person. And it's just so simply stated. That's just the way we're made. You know, very true spiritual people are very sympathetic. They're not judgmental. They're not harsh. They're very sympathetic, from what I was saying this morning, because they've all lived through this, just like we're living through it. And then Swami said, it's not possible that God would plant such a deep desire in our hearts without also providing the possibility of fulfillment, which is such a marvelous way to think about it, that this is something that it's the way we're made. Now, I'm not talking about sexual union. I'm talking about why we seek sexual union, is because we want to be loved. And Master himself almost never talked about soulmates. He only talked about it in one place, because you just whisper that topic and everybody forgets about everything else, and all they want to know about is soulmates. So he only mentions it when he's talking about in the Bible, where Jesus says, what God has joined together, let no man put asunder, which has become a dogma against divorce. But Master himself said, most marriages are not real marriages, meaning they're not soul marriages. They're just two people who, and he's actually quite cynical, who listen to a little romantic music and get in the mood. He was very unsentimental. But everything happens on multiple levels. So, you know, you have the most animalistic impulse, and then you have a more and more refined impulse. But the fact about soulmates, the way Master spoke about it, is everything in this world is dual, and he just simply said, it's a fact. Every soul has a counterpart. However, the actual soul union that he's speaking about has to transcend physical imperative. So if there's a physical imperative, you're operating on the materialistic plane, you're not operating on the spiritual plane. So what happens is people get very confused about romantic, sexual, passionate love, and where we live, we think that that's the biggest we can think of, so that's what we go for. But it's very nice, you know, it's the way we're made. It's very nice to be loved on all levels and all ways, but that's not the same as what he's really talking about, where we transcend everything, and before we merge with God, we merge back with our other half. However, in Marie Corelli's book and Swami's book is the other part of it, like how many lifetimes do we have together, and the story of that Swami wrote, which is just a gorgeous story, is all about all the times that this, as it were, a man and a woman, although Master said, you know, when you finally have that final soul union, that it's not gender-based because it's not physically based. Gender is just a factor of physicality. But in the romantic story, it's a man and a woman, and all these lifetimes when they tried to love each other and just made a hash of it. You know? It's like desire leads to a wanting for fulfillment, and that fulfillment is not given to us, so we become angry. So from lovers we become enemies, and then we kill each other for a while, and then we realize that doesn't work, and so that, you know, just, and been there, done that, really kind of tells the story, doesn't it? We all know how love turns to anger when desire is thwarted. And so on one hand, sexuality is just the natural beginning of the desire for union and the most accessible expression of the desire for union. It's also a magnificent, the phrase that was going to come to my mind is dumbbell, but that's not exactly what I mean because nobody uses dumbbells anymore. You go to the machines and the gym and you push heavy weights around all the time. I don't because I die of boredom. But people do, you know, they push heavy weights around. And when you're trying to get strong, you don't just put a tiny weight on there, because how would you ever get strong if you were just lifting what you could lift? So we are in this God-created weird experience of having to learn who we really are, which is what I've been talking about. And physical imperatives are one of those things that we have to come to understand. And sexuality is one of the most compelling imperatives. For almost everyone, it's much better not to be celibate because it just creates too much pressure on us, you know. Well, they use the phrase, instead of getting lighter and lighter, people get tighter and tighter. It just doesn't work. So for most people, and in balanced societies, people marry. In actual sane societies, they actually, like, it's all taken care of nowadays because self-control is a very foreign concept. And because we're so materialistic, see, everything comes back to materialism. We just try as a culture, the more intensely physical the experience can be, therefore the better it is. Now, of course, this is a joke. This is not true. Anybody who actually deeply enters into that experiment finds out. You know, sex is sex. That's what it is. You know, it's not the be-all and the end-all of existence, period. So you can go as far as you want into it, and in the end, you'll just still be wanting something else. Now, there's also, and I'm not an expert because I've never felt it was important for me to understand, but there's lots of subtle energies because of the second chakra and the proximity to the lower chakras and all of that, and creativity, and there's lots of things that can be said. But the main thing to be said is physicality is not spirituality. But sexual union, if the rest of the relationship is used in an uplifted way, is an extremely positive way of grounding people's energy, of teaching us to be unselfish, of learning to give rather than always trying to get, in learning to be faithful, to be restrained. These are all extraordinary important lessons. And God made us in such a way that we get to learn them. You know, sometimes quite painfully, we hurt each other more out of sexuality than almost anything else. But it's almost always, and of course you can be perverse, but let's forget perversity. Almost always sexual misconduct is the desire to be loved. You know, we don't set out to hurt people. We accidentally hurt people because we're compelled. And when we're compelled, we do stupid things. You know, it's just the way it works. And we suffer, and sometimes we suffer a lot. But I think the best way, let me phrase it this way, the only way I understand to think about sexuality, I don't think of it as, I don't know anything about Tantra, I don't know anything about sort of working with sexual energy. The way, let me think how to put it, I think it was Master, but it might have been someone else. You know, you can work with sexuality and sort of challenge yourself to control it, and there's a whole tantric system, which is not, this was a joke. These are, you know, I've lived with this all so long. When people were first learning about the concept of Tantra, it became like a new pickup line in the bar, you know. So I've been studying Tantra, you know. And it's supposed to be about transcending sexuality. It's not supposed to be about let's have more and more interesting sexuality. But that we all laughed about that one a lot. Okay, but there is a genuine practice, more or less, but it's not a very elevated way in which to enter into the spiritual life. And you have to be really sure that what you're doing is a good idea and isn't just like a back door into something else that you are really trying to have instead of real transcendence. So I think the best attitude towards sexuality, lots of spiritual people just get so caught up in this. Swamiji said to me once, he said, one of the biggest problems in Ananda marriages is sexuality. Because I often said really stupid things to him, I said, that's not very original, sir. Really, can't we just be a little more creative than this? He said, but then when I would say stupid things, he would remain solid. And he would say, no, Asha, it's actually true. He said, because, one or the other of the partners begins to think that they ought to be celibate, and they stop seeing their partner as a friend and start seeing their partner as a tempter. And then he said, and then it just cascades downhill after that. And Swami's entire attitude and feeling was, it's just a natural part of life. It's neither really as important as everybody says it is, nor is it possible to just put it out of your life. It's an imperative. And if you live in close proximity with someone that you love, the sexual energy is inevitably going to come forward. And my understanding, and this is a little bit of the gospel according to Asha, which is a little different. I mean, I remember when Swami first sent me out, out. That's how we would think of it, because we lived so isolated at Ananda village. You would be sent out, So I had to go out and talk to people elsewhere. And I said to Swamiji, sir, I know I should be loyal to Master's teachings. Of course I should be. And Master says that perfect celibacy, if you really want to attract a divine partner, you should be perfectly celibate, and so on like that. I said, I can't suggest that to anyone. And then I said, because you have taught me, sir, that you have to suggest to people what they can do. I can't go out into the society that we live in and tell people to be celibate. It'll just make them crazy. And it'll make them guilty, and it'll make them confused, and I won't be very popular. I was up in Seattle, Washington in the 80s. I used to be a circuit preacher for Seattle, Washington. I go up there to the Ananda group, and these two girls, they happened to be from Poland, but that didn't matter. But they were just these two lovely ladies. They became totally infatuated with these teachings and with me, and they were so excited, and they bought all the books. And they bought Whispers from Eternity, Master's poems. And somewhere in there it says something like, save me from the perils of sexual temptation. They called me at 7 in the morning. And they came over at 7 in the morning with this book in their hand and wanted to know if this is really what I was teaching. And I said, well, that's the Guru, and that's what he said. I never saw them again. So I said to Swami, I can't do that. I have to give people something realistic. And he said, well, of course you do. That was just his response, of course you do. It's like, we can't make a religion out of sexuality. That's a desecration. It's just who we are. And as Swami often said, there's so many things that are much worse. Treachery and cruelty and hatred and all sorts of things. And this is just a natural part of life. Let's just integrate it into our lives, do the best we can, but for heaven's sakes, let's not make our spiritual life defined by it. Speaking of the couples, it's just like, let's just be this way. I know when there was a time in Ananda village when the monastery dissolved and a lot of the monks and nuns married each other, and suddenly, bingo, we were a household community, just like that. It was very efficient. And there was one of the men, and it's sort of because it's a very small family, so everybody knows everything. He was just basically trying to be celibate in his marriage. Swami's response was, you can't have it both ways. And besides that, you can't make that decision alone anymore. You've drawn this woman into your life. And so you're not a solitary. You can't just say this is the conditions. No. If you're going to live that way, you have to live that way. But really, how should I say this? God doesn't care. He really doesn't. And I don't know, religions get very confused, and we need to be very, very careful about it. Of course, we should be self-controlled. It's very important to be self-controlled. You shouldn't be compelled by anything. You should be conscious and careful and elegant and refined and generous and selfless. And, if celibacy works for you, great. And if sexuality is necessary, just live your life as it feels natural. And if it's something else is required of you, it'll come to you. It'll come to you. Is that good enough? Okay. All right. Dare I ask for another question? Okay. Neha?
Asha, we have a question online from Charlie. He says, earlier you touched on the importance of the chakras. Do I need to have my chakras cleaned, or will meditation help with that process?
Wait, just a second. Wait, Neha, say that last part. Something about cleaning the chakras, but say it a little more slowly. Okay.
Do I need to have my chakras cleaned, or will meditation help with that process?
Someone wrote to me, a woman had a hysterectomy and she'd been told that her second chakra had been removed and she wanted. I said that would be one heck of a surgeon. That's all I can say. If you can find someone, a chakra cleaning company. This is do you deliver them and then come back in 3 days, or do you have to stay there? I'm sorry, Charlie. I know it's a real question. Let me answer you realistically. First of all, I'm just going to say, if you go onto my YouTube channel and type in the word chakras, you're going to find a lot of long conversations about this, including a little thing that I just finished of like 20 classes, each 30 minutes about the chakras. And it would be helpful to get a bigger picture. The reason I'm not teaching it here is because I have other things to talk about. It would take all the time we have and more. Your chakras are the energy system that completely define who you are, and I did touch on this. So yes, the energy in your chakras is it. That's you. Everything else is a manifestation of you. And so what the energy in your chakras is absolutely vital. But you can't, the word I want to use is you can't cheat. What I mean is there's no quick fix to this. It's like you can't just have your chakras cleaned and then, what do you know? I'm much more enlightened. There's no such thing as doing something to your chakras that you're not doing with your own consciousness. The whole practice of meditation, the whole practice of Kriya Yoga, everything is about refining, elevating, uplifting, liberating the energy in your chakras. So it's like if you want to be on the spiritual path, even if you don't know it, even if you've never heard the word chakra and have no idea what you're doing, you're shifting your energy pattern. And yes, you should shift your energy pattern. And yes, you should do everything you can to shift it in a harmonious and a wonderful way. As it happens, though, as I was saying before, there's no shortcut. There was a gentleman, a very good friend of mine. He lived in our community for 20 years. He lives elsewhere now, but he used to come to my classes. He was great. He would ask lots of really good questions. But after a while, I began to realize that there was a pattern to his questions. And no matter where he started or what he was asking, the actual question was, isn't there an easier way? Isn't there a shortcut that, like, if I keep asking you, you're going to tell me? So sometimes the idea that I'm going to do something to my chakras, and it's perfectly understandable because it's a valid principle. Can I go to a healer? Can I go to a chakra clearer? And sometimes those things are good. I have a very effective psychic friend, and she gifted me with a whole series of chakra treatments, and I lay on her bed, and we had St. John the Divine, the Brazilian healer. He cut all these crystals, and I lay on this bed, and we had all these crystals, and they went from chakra to chakra, and she walked around and played the little bells, and it was fantastic. I absolutely loved it all. And I think it, gave me energy, but I also have to change myself. I also have to be disciplined. I also have to watch my attitudes. I also have to be kind. I also have to meditate. You know, all of that is much more effective, and there is no alternative to it. The simple question, do I have to clear the energy in my chakras? Yeah, you do. So then the next question is how? And that is the spiritual path. One of the things about the way these masters teach us is that the real way you clear your chakras is not by, you know, breaking the dam with one big punch. It's by gradually, okay, the chakras, I mentioned the vrittis. It's like if you think of a river, I was going to say I grew up, because I grew up at Ananda village. I became an adult person at Ananda village. We had the Yuba River. You go down to the river. River flows like this. All that water's heading for the sea, and it's determined to get to the sea. And some of the water gets deflected into whirlpools. And you can stand there and you can watch it. Some is heading for the sea, and some of it is just going to play over here, you know, and just going to keep doing this. And that's exactly what's going on with us. There's the fundamental flow of what is Kundalini energy, which is going by concentration into the divine light. And then we have these vrittis, which is, yes, I want God, but I also want to be a movie star. So I need to be beautiful, so I have to like look around for parents that are really pretty, that I can be born into, preferably in Los Angeles, you know. And then I have to, you know, have nice clothes, so they have to be rich, you know. And then I didn't quite make it as a movie star because I was too short, so I have to find taller parents. You know, this is the vritti. Yes, I want God, but I also want to be a movie star. And I also want to be rich, and I also want to have a nice home, and, you know, just the whole story. So some of us is flowing like the river to the sea, and some of us is spinning around in these other things that we need to find out if they're going to satisfy us, right? And there's lots of different ways to clear the chakras, which is to dissolve those vrittis and have all the water, all the energy flow to the sea. But the best way for those vrittis to be dissolved, think now let's go back to the Yuba River. When the Yuba River is really flowing powerfully, the magnetic balance between the whirlpool and the flow of the river is such that the whirlpool just flows right into the river. So the best way to clear our chakras is to love God. Because the more we are focused on our deepest aspirations with devotion and power, those vrittis just disappear. Because the flow of energy upward toward the spirit becomes just, it's just metaphysics. It just becomes, I love God more than I love cigarettes and beer. Or, let's say, how about sexuality? You know, it's not that it's bad, it's that I love this more. And that's how it really gets cleared. And that way of clearing it also is harmonious, because it's happening as a natural shift of our consciousness. And this is why you start to meditate, and in the weirdest way you change, and you don't even really know why. But what happened is the river was strong enough to start dissolving those vrittis, and your chakras are clean, just kind of automatically as a consequence of the other work that you're doing. And you don't even know you've changed, except you might get happier, and then something will happen. I think I mentioned this morning, and you just respond differently. Because the vritti that caused you to respond that way has been absorbed into the river. So when that situation comes back to you, you don't respond that way anymore. Which is why everything, to touch back on the sexuality question, the more you lift your energy up in divine ways, serving others, loving others, giving to others, doing meditation practice, chanting, all these things, the more everything else takes care of itself. And sometimes, you know, sometimes when those vrittis dissolve, they come in with a big bump. You know, and it hits the river, and there's a rock and a couple of trees, and it all just goes kaboom for a while. You know, the karma comes to the surface, and you have to live through it. Much of the time, You don't even know it. You just suddenly are different. Okay? Any other questions? Do you have more, Neha, online? Mm-hmm.
Well, this one,
Okay. Oh, Daniel had a question. Okay, let's do that one first, then we'll do yours after Neha. Daniel?
Yes. We didn't discuss it today, but in other classes, can everybody hear me?
Okay, try again.
Hi. Usually everybody can hear me without a mic anyway.
Okay.
My question, I wanted to ask about deepening willpower, creativity, and concentration. I know all three of these are important, but I wanted to just focus on, for a moment, concentration. How can I deepen my own levels of concentration that I know that can support me on the path?
Master always said that practicing the Hong Sa meditation technique helps teach us concentration. That's watching the breath. That's what Kyle led us in this morning, I believe. And I know that you had the opportunity to learn it. He said that specifically trains your concentration, watching the breath, because the breath is unrelenting and it's always there. And you're either, especially when you're practicing that, you're either watching it or you're not. The other way that you practice concentration, Swamiji thought that multitasking was the death of all excellence and a complete disaster for all yogis. And he never, ever, ever did that. He said the secret of creativity and accomplishment is to concentrate completely on one thing at a time. And he was emphatic about that. Now, if you look at your own environment, I know, Daniel, you're raising 3 children in a small apartment, so I know that you only have a certain amount of control over the chaos in your world. But look around at your environment. Is this the environment of a concentrated person? Is this the environment of a scattered person? If I try to do any work, you know how many different things are fighting for my attention? And, just look at every aspect of your life as if you were an outsider. The way you dress, the way you eat, the way you keep your house, everything. Is this the environment? Are these the habits that build focus? Or are these the habits that build confusion? The number of people who keep the television on, the radio on, whatever it might be, where there's just always 2 or 3 inputs coming in. How can anybody concentrate and do any good work like that? And ourselves, it's very tempting. I have a very intuitive sense of energy, and you can be talking to someone on the phone and you can tell immediately that they're reading their emails. You can just feel it just like that. Right. Or whatever else it might be. Whatever it is, don't. It's just as simple as that. Don't. Train yourself to be in the now, doing exactly what you're doing. I worked as Swami Kriyananda's secretary for a number of years, just a few years. And he received lots of letters, not like he did in the later years, but there was lots. Often he would have me answer them, but he would always read them. And I would say to people, because I witnessed it, when he was reading a letter, there was no other reality. And I'm a bit of a kind of impulsive Gemini, and I learned, he would be reading a letter and I would try to get him involved in something else. He wouldn't even look up. He wouldn't even dignify it by noticing that I was there. He didn't scold me very often because I was very vulnerable. But he would communicate. Like, I'm reading this letter. Why on earth are you talking to me? He didn't have to say it. But of course, why would I be talking to him when he was reading that letter? And I think it's you just watch yourself, and the more you can just do what you do with 100% of your energy and be content to do that. Well, the first divine experience I had when I was 19 years old. I was just beginning to learn these teachings. I met Swami when I was 22, so it was a little later. But I was just sort of beginning to get the idea. And I have this very Gemini mind, and it likes to do lots of things at the same time. Concentration has not been easy for me to learn. 3 of the 4 books I've written are little short sections because I could concentrate very deeply for a short period of time. So I would write a whole story and I'd be done and I'd put it away. And it was hard when I realized I had to write a book that went from front to back. It was a little scary. But I trained myself, little bits at a time. But I remember distinctly, I was washing the dishes, but while I was washing the dishes, I was already on to whatever I was going to do next. And I heard a voice inside my head, and it had a slight New York accent. I was in California, but it had a slight New York accent. And it said, "What's your hurry, honey? It's just one damn thing after another." And that actually was a really good question. And ever since, all these years since, whenever I start thinking that somehow it's going to be better if I only half do this and get to the next one, what's your hurry, honey? It's just one damn thing after another. And the more you can just pull that thought in, and I'll never be content as long as I do not focus here. And yeah, Swamiji was unusually talented in multiple fields. He said most multi-talented people don't accomplish very much because they're constantly getting distracted. He said he could, because when he wrote books, he couldn't even imagine writing music. And when he was writing music, he didn't know how he ever wrote books. When he was counseling people or giving a lecture, he couldn't imagine being by himself working in his office. He just trained himself. And it's a choice. And it's a discipline. And we have to work on it. Okay?
Thank you.
Yes? Okay.
Sitting here, my ears are buzzing from the 5G or the whatever G that it is, this technology that we have. You can't walk into an elevator without everybody
Right.
looking
We know
at their phones.
we know the issue. Okay.
But I'm concerned, I'm really concerned, and I do believe that we have the capacity to be connected in such a deep way without, being sold this bill of goods that we're going to be more connected with all this technology and chips in our hands and chips in our brains and then the billions of cycles.
Okay, I get the point. Okay, but is that the question? Yeah, the question is, the world is in a weird place. And all this technology is inspired by the cosmos. It's not coming from the devil. It's because the world is going to be united in higher ages. Space and time are eradicated first by technology and then by consciousness. Steve Jobs, who's personally responsible for a great deal of this, was profoundly and deeply connected to Paramahansa Yogananda. It's confusing, isn't it? Because simultaneously, that which is advancing our society is also dismantling it and destroying it, either destroying our bodies or our nervous systems, our relationships with each other. So everything that's happening on the planet right now is a super mixed bag. And this is early Dwapara Yuga. This is early age of energy. That's what Dwapara Yuga is. Dwapara Yuga is a very insecure, chaotic yuga. And it's only the last 2,400 years, But it must have been a good idea for us to be here at this time. So we are also working out. What's happening right now is that man has the technological ability to blow the planet to pieces and lacks the moral fiber to not do it, right? That's exactly where we are. At the same time, these masters have descended, and in Autobiography of a Yogi, I knew the page number, but it's right up here on the right, and it says, Jesus and Babaji are very concerned about what's going on the planet right now. They're concerned about excessive materialism, racial hatred, religious bigotry, suicidal wars. They're very concerned about all of that. But they have planned the salvation of this age, which is to reunite us with Spirit. But these things happen. The whole story of Atlantis is a true story, of Atlantis becoming so technologically perverse that Mother Earth just ate the whole continent, right? And Mother Earth is going to do something similar to us again. She's quite annoyed. As Swami put it, she moves slowly, but once she starts, nothing can stop her. So yeah, that's all that's going on here. Now, I'm going to answer your question by answering more of what Uta asked me this morning about the Ukraine. And this is the same answer. The material expression of things is the last level of manifestation. Because we live in the material world and it's so easy to see, we can't help but think that this is the causative force. But everything in creation, and Swamiji had a wonderful way of just bringing things down to a very practical level. There's the causal world, there's the astral world, there's the material world. This is the causal world is the world of ideas, the astral world is the world of energy, the material world is this one here, okay? Everything that we do in our lives, it goes through those three stages, doesn't it? All of you are here because at some point you thought of coming here, didn't you? You thought of coming here, you put energy into that thought by finding out how to get here, how much it would cost, sending somebody money, registering, putting your body in some kind of a conveyance so that you could be here. Thought, energy, manifestation. Now, we see things manifesting, but before they manifest, they have gone through the causal, the astral, to get to the material plane. They're conscious beings on all of those levels, just as we have our politicians and prime ministers and spiritual teachers here. There are people, energy, individuals, jivas, on all those levels working with that energy. Some are devas, which are angelic beings. Some are asuras, which are darker beings. You have, it's all interplaying. If you really want to affect change, people think, well, I have to pick up the physical object and move it over here. No. Change is affected first with thought, first with ideas, then energy added to those ideas, then it's finally manifesting. When you're talking about a planet, and you're talking about a whole society, it's taken a long time for us to get to this point, and it's not going to get different just by saying, I don't like it. You know, I don't like it. I think it's icky. You know, I mean, how much energy is there in that? It took, a lot of people didn't think it was icky. They thought it was a really good idea. But if we really want to affect change, we start first by changing ourselves, and we put strong, clear thought behind where we want to go. We put energy behind that, and eventually it manifests. So all of you are here because you're trying, I'm trying, to change ourselves, and that's how the world is changed. But it doesn't change just like that. It changes very slowly. There's a very interesting, my friend wrote a little historical story. Paramahansa Yogananda said that in a previous incarnation he was William the Conqueror, and his spiritual advisor was Lanfranc, who was Sri Yukteswar. Okay, let's just take that as the given, whether that makes sense to you or not, but just take it for the conversation. Lanfranc, they were all Catholics at that time, and Lanfranc started the Cluny Monastery, somewhere in France. 12 monks. Okay? By the time, and my friend was tracing this out historically, 100 years later, 150 years later, from 12 monks, architecture, music, art of various forms, the liturgy of the church, farming methods, like all these things, all transformed, starting with 12 monks. Because 12 divided into this. But when they started, everything was pretty icky. But they, instead of just pointing out what was wrong, they started creating what was right. Thus, Ananda, for example, as a different way of doing things. When I went to India for the first time in 1986, the first time I'd been outside the Western world, and India in '86 was quite different than it is now. I looked at I'm in a 5-star hotel in Calcutta, and I'm on the 10th floor, and I can look down and I can see the family that lives on the sidewalk. And for the week that I was there, I could watch their life on the sidewalk. We have all the money, we have all the technology, we have all the resources to make this world a paradise. Gee, I wonder why we don't. It's because people don't want to. In other words, it's not a problem of anything but the human heart. So we have to start working on the human heart. And what is wrong? Why is the human heart so petty and mean and selfish? Because we all feel empty and want something and are trying to fill it with something. So people fill it with really wrong stuff. So we have to change consciousness. And I consider myself to be the most politically active person I know. I've spent my whole life trying to change people's consciousness. And as I said the first night I was here, consciousness has really changed. It's 50 years ago, now, at least in California. Not everyone meditates, but those who don't feel guilty about it. I mean, really, that is huge. So if you care, begin to think differently, act differently, and live differently. And it will change, because we're in an ascending age. But that's the only solution. If one responds to the negativity with fear or negativity, where is the solution going to come from? When there was this movement called Beyond War, it was, I think, an initiative in California to ban nuclear energy. These people came, they were very good at what they did. And they presented this, they wanted Ananda to back this political thing. So they presented to Swami this whole thing, and it was super well done, very smart, good people. And it was about, if a nuclear bomb falls on, I don't know, Cincinnati, Los Angeles, Chicago, this many tens of thousands will be vaporized instantly. This many will turn into ash. You know, these people will be dead in an hour. You know, these will be maimed for 4 generations. It was very, very compelling. Swami listened quite politely. And then afterwards he said, you know, I commend what you're doing. I recognize the goodness that motivates you. He said, but if you're really trying to combat something negative, fear is not a good tactic. Because fear is the same vibration of what you're trying to combat. And that's what we have to be careful about, because it's all vibrations. And if you're trying to counter something that you think is dangerous, with fear, anger, judgment, harshness, you can do some good. You can shift a few of the rocks around. But if you really want to change it, you have to change consciousness, which you cannot do unless you have changed your own. So this is our mandate. This is our job. Those of us who have noticed need to dedicate ourselves to what we understand. And never underestimate the power. Ever. Okay? So, Sneha, you had one more from the line.
Actually, this was a question that was given to me earlier, and I just wanted to read it. If we all came from God, we were made in His image and are already perfect, how come the goal of the spiritual path is to merge back with Him?
I'm sorry, I missed a line. How come the goal of the spiritual path is?
To merge back in Him.
Why is that the goal?
Why the journey? You know, if we all came from God, why do we have to take the journey to merge back to God?
Because we feel miserable and we don't like to suffer. However, what you're actually asking is, why did God make it the way He made it? And there's a lot of tricky answers to that one. Vivekananda's answer is, the level of consciousness that asks the question cannot comprehend the answer. That's clever. That's clever. The other one is, you never understand God's point of view until you share His consciousness. Which is, I think that's good too, right? And the actual answer is, like, I don't know. You know? If it were my plan, I would have made it different. But if it were my plan, we all wouldn't be sitting here, because it would just be over. There would be no story, no drama, no adventure, no opportunity to grow, no novels, no movies, no nothing. It's confusing, isn't it? And sometimes you just have to, like, who cares? In that book I have, Ask Asha, let me think how this goes. I took on that question because somebody asked me that question, and I think of it like this. If you're in prison, and prison conditions are not very pleasant, and you have an opportunity to make, to do certain things that makes your experience of being in prison less and less prison-like, it's really not important who put you in prison. And it's not even important whether you're guilty or innocent. The fact of the matter is, you're suffering. And if certain ways will make you suffer less and bring you more happiness, some questions are what we used to call interesting but not relevant. I remember when Shivani, she took a seclusion, I don't really remember what the context was, but she got a head of steam going. Shivani is my peer, she lives in Assisi, and she's a very marvelously feisty, strong-willed lady. And she came out of seclusion and she sort of marched up to Swamiji. She's not a very tall person. She's a mighty person, but she's not very tall. She walked up to Swami and she essentially said, "Why?" like that. Swami's answer was, "Shivani, what difference would it make?" Which is really a very, we like to play with these ideas, but what difference would it make? You could argue, think it should be this way, it should be that way. Sure, people entertain themselves doing that for a long time. There's a certain point where you just want your understanding to be practical. You're just not interested in spinning theories and talking ideas. I'm not happy today. How can I make myself happier? My life is not going the way I want it. How can I make it go the way I want it? And just these other questions you just put over here for now. And, accept the Master's answers. If I can merge back in God, then I'll understand. And here's the real key, though. Every saint, every master, every guru, every teacher says, it's all right. You think it's a stinky plan, but actually it's all right. It's going to come out all right. Not one of them says, it was a bum deal. They all say, you don't understand it now, but you will. And when you do, you won't mind anymore. So there is also comes a point where we become persuaded that we are connected to someone who knows. I mean, Paramhansa Yogananda, I had Swami Kriyananda. I knew that he knew. And you might have noticed, I have a pretty feisty mind. I'm not gullible and I don't like to take anybody's word for it. At the same time, Swami just had a way of being right when I gave his answers to me enough time. And I just began to realize that I didn't know everything. And that thank God, there were people who knew a lot more than me. And if I just followed their protocols for a while, I would begin to understand. So with a question like that, what would you do differently if you knew? And one can just fold one's arms and say, I don't like the way you're doing things, God. I refuse to cooperate. I'm not going to try to merge with God. I'm just going to sit here because I don't like your system. Sure, honey, go ahead, That's what people do all the time. And actually, tomorrow when you come, when we read the Festival of Light, it's called the Revolt. First, you come out and you're created in this world, you have a divine mission, you decide to not follow it, you just rebel. And you say, I want it to be different. Little children, this little girl I knew, she wanted to have chocolate cake for breakfast. And Mommy said, honey, you won't go up strong and healthy if you have chocolate cake for breakfast. And the little girl said, yes, I will. Infallible logic. Why did God make it like this? You shouldn't have made it like this. Oh, well, gee, I never thought of that. It's like you just self-declare. And then you come to the point where you start sincerely asking, what can I do? How can I serve? How can I expand? And the rest of it just doesn't matter anymore. Well, we have reached our appointed hour. So I think Sri Sri Kelly Ji is going to come up and entertain us. Thank you.
So I just wanted to let you know about what's happening this evening. And thank you, all of you, for your beautiful questions. We covered so many important topics: sexuality, technology, and the importance of not multitasking them. And you asked for it. And so it's 5 o'clock right now. We'll be having dinner on our own until 7 o'clock. And at 7 o'clock, Asha Nayaswami will be speaking about the art of superconscious living. It's beautiful. And we'll end our evening tonight with a beautiful kirtan concert at 8:30 tonight. So come back for more. It's going to be beautiful. Enjoy your dinner. If you have any questions about where to go, this great person to ask is Inez. Have a beautiful night. See you soon. 7 o'clock.